Good day everyone. Today I am going to discuss the chapter 11, Grammar and Meaning. First, I am going to discuss the first part of the grammar and meaning, which is the grammatical classes and meaning. Grammatical classes are the backbone of linguistic structure, each playing distinct roles in organizing and conveying meaning. So again, grammatical classes and meaning. Grammatical classes are the backbone of linguistic structure, each playing distinct roles in organizing and conveying meaning. Their significance lies in how they define and constrain the interpretation of sentences. Now, in grammatical classes and meaning, we're going to discuss first the semantic rules of classes. First is nouns. Noun means represent entities, objects, or abstract concept. For example, the mountain is tall. It's physically entity. Her happiness was evident. So that means abstract concept. The mountain is tall. It's physical entity. Her happiness was evident is the abstract concept. Nouns provide stability in meaning by naming objects, subjects, and possessive entities. Now let's proceed to the second in semantic rules of classes, which is the verb. Verbs capture dynamic processes, actions, or states. For example, the child runs. So it's action. He exists. It is a state. Verbs are inherently temporal and are often central to sentence meaning. Let's proceed to the adjectives. Adjectives add descriptive attribute to nouns. Example, the red apple versus the delicious apple. Adjectives refine the meaning of the nouns by specifying their qualities. Next is the adverbs. Adverbs modify verbs, adjective, or other adverbs, providing context such as time, place, or manner. Example of adverb: she sings beautifully. So, beautifully here is the manner. She sings beautifully is the manner. He arrived yesterday, which is time. Next is the ambiguity and polysemy. Ambiguity occurs when a word's class or meaning is unclear in the context. Again, ambiguity occurs when a word's class or meaning is unclear in the context. For example, she will light the fire. Verb versus the room was filled with light, which is noun. So polysemy refers to a single word having multiple related meanings. Example, bank. Bank can mean a financial institution or the side of a river, or the specific meaning is inferred from the context. It depends upon the context. Next is the context dependence. The meaning of words with grammatical classes is highly reliant on syntactic structure. Modal verbs. Can as a modal verb implies ability or permission. She can swim. Nouns. Can as a noun refers to a container. The can is full. So in the sentence context, he is running can imply physical movement or a metaphorical pursuit. Example, running for office. He is running can imply physical movement, or it can imply a metaphorical pursuit. So again, the meaning of words with grammar is highly reliant on the syntactic structure. Next, context shapes interpretation by placing constraints on possible meanings and clarify and intended usage. Next is structural and functional perspectives. There is ongoing debate about whether grammatical classes should be defined primarily by, first, syntactic rule. The second one is the intrinsic semantic features. If we say syntactic rules, words, positions, and relationship within a sentence. Example, runs function as a verb because it predicates the action of a subject. Again, syntactic rules, words, position, and relationship within a sentence. Example, runs function as a verb because it predicates the action of a subject. If we say naman intrinsic semantic features, the inherent meaning of the word itself. Again, the inherent meaning of the word itself. Run implies motion or flow, a characteristic typical of verb, which is run. Most linguists agree that grammatical classes arise from a combination of structure and function. Structuralists argue that classes are determined by patterns of co-occurrence. Example, where a word appears in a sentence. Functionalists emphasize the role of semantics, considering meaning a key driver of class distinction. Now let's proceed to the second part of the grammar and meaning, which is the secondary categories and meaning. Grammatical features that add depth and nuance to meaning beyond the primary grammatical classes. First is the gender. Gender highlights how grammatical gender systems such as masculine, feminine, and in language like German assign rules and sometimes influence perceived attribute of object or inheritance. So in grammatical gender system, Allerton emphasizes grammatical gender does not always align with biological or social gender. It is structural features that can reflect semantic, cultural, or purely grammatical distinction. In language like German, nouns are assigned masculine, feminine, or again, in language like German, nouns are assigned masculine, feminine, or neuter gender. Example, dirty. Table, masculine. Lamp, feminine. Child, neuter. Influence and perception. Allerton suggests that gender system may subtly influence speakers' perception of objects, associating them with traditionally gender traits like strength, masculine, or elegance, feminine. In cross-linguistic variation, some language, example English, have largely abandoned grammatical gender, while others, example French and Spanish, integrate into nouns. While others in French and Spanish, they integrate gender into nouns, adjective, and articles. So number explains distinction like singular, plural, and dual forms and their impact on understanding quantity. Singular and plural. Allerton identifies number as a universal features. Again, Allerton identifies number as a universal feature that marks distinction between one singular and more than one plural, as seen in languages like English, like for example dogs. So in dual forms, he highlights language like Arabic and Slovene that includes a dual form for precisely two objects. These features reflects a more granular approach to counting. Example, Oven, Ruka, hand is singular. Ruki, two hands. Rok, plural hands. So in unmarked number, in language like Japanese, number is often inferred from context rather than marked morphologically, allowing flexibility in expression. Next is dexis and person. Discusses how pronouns and dexis, example this, that, orients speech in relation to the speaker and listener. Person, example of first person, second person, third, encodes speakers and listeners' rules. Dexis, deictic terms like this and that, anchor communication to the speaker's perspective. Spatial dexis, near or far, orient objects in relation to the speaker. Example, English distinguishes proximity. This book near the speaker versus that book farther away. So person, Allerton underscore the rule of person, second and third person pronouns in marking speaker. I or we, listener. In marking speaker is I or we, listener is you, and others, he, she, they. Pronouns encode relational rules with nuances in inclusivity. Example, exclusive versus inclusive, we in some Austronesian languages. Case. The rule of case system in marking grammatical relationship like subject, nominative, object, accusative, or position, genitive. Example includes Latin and Russian cases. So function of case system. Cases mark the syntactic and semantic roles of noun, including subject, nominative, object, accusative, and position, genitive. Example from Latin. Puella amat puerum, the girl loves the boy. Puella, girl, which is the nominative or the subject. Puerum, boy, accusative, which is the object. Again, the girl is the nominative, which is the subject. The boy there is the accusative, which is the object. Flexibility in word order. Allerton highlights that inflectional languages like Latin or Russian rely on case markings for clarity, allowing more flexible word order compared to non-inflectional languages. Next is the voice. Voice distinguishes active. Subject performs the action, and the passive, the subject receives the action, construction. So active voice, the subject performs the action maintaining a straightforward focus. For example, an active voice, the dog chased the cat. So again, the subject there is the one who performs the action to maintain a straightforward focus. Next is the passive voice. Shift focus to the action or the object being acted upon. Again, passive voice shift focus to the action or the object being acted upon. Example, the cat was chased by the dog. In the agent omission, passage construction often omit the agent to downplay or responsibility or highlights the action. Example, mistakes were made. Next is the mood. Explore how verb forms in indicative, imperative, subjunctive convey the speaker's attitude towards the action. So indicative mood states fact or asks question. Example, she is studying. Imperative mode, it issues commands or requests. Example, study now. Subjunctive mood express hypotheticals, wishes, or possibilities. Example, if I were a bird. So that is a subjunctive mood. In cross-linguistic variation, languages like French and Spanish use the subjunctive mood more extensively as seen in sentence like this example. I want you to come. Next is the tense and aspects. Differentiates between the timing of an action, tense, past, present, future, and its nature or duration, aspect, progressive, perfect. Please. Okay, let's continue. Tense and aspect. Tense and aspect differentiates between the timing of an action, tense, past, present, and future, and its nature and or duration, aspect, progressive, perfective. Tense and aspect encodes the timing of an action. Again, tense and aspects. Tense encodes the timing of an action. Present, she writes. For example, in the present form, she writes. In the past form, she wrote. Future, she will write. Again, tense encodes the timing of an action, while the aspects describe the nature of the action. Progressive aspect highlights ongoing action. Example, she is writing. In a perfective aspect, focuses on completed action. Example, she has written. Allerton points out that some languages, example, Mandarin, Chinese, rely more on aspect markers than tense markers, using particles like to indicate completion. So Allerton's contributions, detailed analysis, underscore the richness of secondary grammatical categories in shaping meaning. First is the universal presence in secondary categories and meaning. First, we highlight the grammatical features that add depth and nuance to meaning beyond the primary grammatical class, which is the gender, number, lexis and person, case, and voice, and mode, tense and aspects. So that is the tense and aspect. Now let's proceed. Allerton's contributions. Allerton's detailed analysis underscores the richness of secondary grammatical categories in shaping meaning. First, universal presence, varied expression. While secondary categories like tense, voice, and mode are universally significant, languages express them differently. Nuance and depth. These categories add layers of precisions, subtone communication, encoding relationship, attitudes, and temporal perspective. Cultural insights, features like gender indexes reflect cultural and cognitive frameworks, influencing how speaker perceive and describes the world. Now let's proceed to the third part of grammar and meaning, which is the grammatical structures and meaning. So the structural organization of sentence has profound implication for meaning. Verbal auxiliaries help from complex verb tenses, aspects, and modes. Example, she has been running for an hour. In that example, it's referred to perfect progressive aspect. Subject and object. Subject means the doer of the action. Object, the receiver of the action. Example, the teacher, which is the subject. The teacher praised, which is the subject. Next is the abstract cases. Discusses deep grammar, where grammatical rules, example, agent, experiencer, and patient, are mapped to syntactic position. Example, in John was hurt by Mary, John is the subject or is the patient, and Mary is the agent caused by the action. Next is generative semantic view. This approach links syntax directly to semantics. Example, the boy kicked the ball and the ball was kicked by the boy. Share the same deep structure despite differing surface form. Next is grammar, meaning, and logic. D.G. Allerton's exploration of the relationship between grammar, meaning, and logic delves into how a language serves as both a tool for communication and a reflection for semantic thought processes. This section emphasizes the logical underpinnings of grammar and challenges in reconciling natural language with formal logical system. So first is the grammatical universal. Grammatical universals refer to shared linguistic features across all languages, suggesting that human cognition imposes certain structural requirements on language. So the core universal, all languages have ways to express negation. Example, no in English, pass in French, je ne sais pas, I don't know. Universal presence of creation formation, whether through word order or particles or intonation. So it's an example in core value universal. Example, English, is she coming, in word order. In Mandarin Chinese, so like this, ta lai ma, using the particle ma. So, logical basis, this universal reflects the fundamental aspect of human thought, such as the ability to differentiate between affirmative and negative states, or to inquire about unknown information. Allerton highlights how such universal points to a shared cognitive foundation across languages, despite surface level differences. So, in grammatical structures, can often be mapped onto formological system, which provide a framework for analyzing and reasoning in language. In a propositional calculus, concern the truth or falsity of statements. So that's the definition of propositional calculus. Example, it is raining. True or false? If combined with a conditional, if it's raining, then the ground is wet, it forms a logical proposition. Next is the predicate calculus. Predicate calculus focuses on the relationship between subject and predicates, often involving variables. So, example, all humans are mortal can be expressed like this. So that is a predicate calculus. So quantifiers, grammatical expression like all, some, or none, encode logical relationship. Example, some cats are black versus all cats are black reflect different quantification of the object. Next is natural language logic. Natural language often applies logical due to idiomatic expression, irregularities, and context dependence. However, Allerton argues that natural language follows its own rules. Idioms and irregularities are governed by consistent grammatical principle within a given language. Example, kick the bucket, idiomatic for dying. Adhere to syntactic rules even though its meaning is non-literal. Context and ambiguity, unlike formal logic, natural language relies heavily on context for interpretation. So example, she saw her duck could mean observing a bird or a crouching action depending on the context. Flexibility. Natural language allows for multiple interpretation and nuances, with formal logic cannot fully capture. Allerton highlights the adaptability of natural language as a strength, enabling speakers to convey subtle meaning that go beyond logical structures. Challenges and formal logic. So there are some challenges faced by the formal logic. Natural language often exceeds the capabilities of formal logic system, presenting challenges such as: first is the ambiguity, next is context dependence, next is creative expression. So ambiguity, a single sentence may have multiple meaning. Visiting relatives can be annoying. Are they visiting you or are you visiting them? So in that sentence, it have multiple meaning. Next is context dependence. Natural language depends on shared knowledge and situation context which formal logical struggles to represent. Again, context dependence. Natural language depends on shared knowledge and situational context which formal logical struggles to represent. Example, it's cold in here might imply a request to close a window rather than a mere observation. Next is creative expression. Figurative language, metaphor, and idioms convey meanings that cannot be directly translated into formal logic. So example, time flies when you're having fun. It is a metaphorical expression of perceived time. Now that's my report on chapter 11, which talks about the grammar and meaning. First is the grammatical classes and meaning, which talks about the semantic rules of classes, ambiguity and polysemy, context dependence, structural and functional perspective. The second part of the chapter 11 is secondary categories, which we discusses the gender, the number, the dexis and person, case, the voice, the mode, tense and aspect. Also, the third part is the grammatical structures and meaning. It discusses about the verbal auxiliary, subject and object, abstract cases, generative semantic rule, and the last one is the grammar and meaning. Talk about the grammatical universals, logical basis, logical representation, natural language logic, challenges of formal logic. So that's the last one. So let's proceed to the chapter 12. Let's proceed to the chapter 12 with grammar and discourse. First, we're going to discuss the textual links between sentence parts. It focuses on how sentences are interconnected and how the relationship contribute to discourse meaning. First is the shared knowledge. Shared knowledge forms the basis of the effective communication. It includes not only linguistic knowledge, example vocabulary and grammar, but also cultural and situational understanding. Example, in she arrived yesterday. The identity of she depends on both speakers and listeners showing prior context without this. So the sentence lacks meaning. So in shared knowledge, why it matters? It matters because communication often fails when shared knowledge is assumed but not present, leading to confusion. Second is the giveness. So there are two types of giveness, the referent and the lexeme giveness. So referent giveness refers to subject or object already introduced or known within the discourse. Example, the dog barked, assumed as the dog has been mentioned before or it's contextually clear. Again, referent giveness refers to subject or object already introduced or known within the discourse. Example, the dog barked assumes that dog has been mentioned before or is contextually clear. Next is the lexeme giveness. Some words inherently assumes familiarity. For instance, the moon or the president presuppose a shared understanding of the different of the referent. So, giveness matter because giveness avoid redundancy, keeping communication efficient and concise. Next is the ellipsis. Ellipsis occurs when parts of a sentence are omitted because the listeners can infer the missing information from context. Example, I like coffee but not tea. The phrase I like before tea is omitted because it is clear from the earlier part of the sentence. So ellipsis, it saves time and words while maintaining clarity, making discourse more natural and less repetitive. Next is the theme and rhyme. Theme, with a part of the sentence representing old or given information. Example, the cat. Rhyme, the new or significant information being introduced. Example is sleeping on the mat. So again, theme, the part of the sentence representing old or give information. Example, the cat. Rhyme, the new information being introduced is sleeping on the mat. Theme and rhyme, why it is matters. Placing new information, rhyme, at the end emphasizes it, guiding the listener's focus on creating a natural information flow. Next is presuppositions and assertions. Presupposition, implicit assumptions that are not directly stated but understood. Example, John stopped smoking presupposes that John used the smoke. Assertion, the explicit statement in the sentence. Example, John stopped smoking asserts that John no longer smokes. So differentiating between the presuppositions and assertions helps clarify what is being communicated versus what is being assumed. So that's the difference between the two. So theme, rhyme, and hypertheme. Theme is the starting focus of the sentence. Rhyme is the part adding information, and the hypertheme, a broader topic that connects multiple sentences or paragraph. So in a discussion about pollution, which is like air quality, might serve as the hypertheme linking individual sentence about its causes, the effects, and the solution. So it matters, this three matters because these elements ensure cohesion in discourse, linking ideas effectively within and across sentences. Now let's proceed to the second part, the sentence patterning within the text. First is the subordination and coordination. If we say subordination, links clauses with a dependent relationship. Example, although it was raining, we went out. Again, subordination, link clauses with a dependent relationship. Although it was raining, we went out. Next is coordination, link clauses as equals. Example, it was raining and we went out. So, in that example, coordination applies, link clauses as equal. Why it matters? Subordination highlights hierarchical relationship while coordination shows equivalence. Together, they structure discourse logically. Next is conjunction and sentence adverbials. Conjunction, it connects ideas explicitly. For example, and, but, because. So that are some example of conjunction. Next is sentence adverbials. It adds nuances or logical flow. So example is are however, so therefore. So that's our example of sentence adverbial. These elements, the use of conjunction and sentence adverbials, these elements clarify relationship between ideas, guiding the audience through cause, contrast, and or addition. So functional sentence types. So we all know that there are parts of sentences: the declarative, interrogative, imperative, and exclamatory. Declarative, make a statement. Example, the sky is blue. Interrogative, asking a question. Example, is the sky blue? Imperative, issues a command or request. Example, close the door. Example, expresses a strong emotion. Example, what a beautiful day. Each type serve a different function, allowing to the speaker, allowing speakers to express facts, ask questions, issue commands, or convey emotion. Next is speech acts and performatives. If we say speech acts, language used to perform an action. Example, I apologize is an act of apologizing. Again, speech acts, it is used to perform an action. So the language used to perform an action. Example, I apologize, an act of apologizing. Next is performatives, utterances that enact, that describe action. Example, I hereby declare this meeting open. I hereby declare these classes ended. So utterance that enact, that describe action. So it matters because understanding performative reveals how language functions as an action itself, not just a medium of communication. Next is the sentence planning, organizing sentences for clarity, style, or emphasis. Example, in conclusion, the data supports our hypothesis. Or example, in conclusion, the data supports our hypothesis, signals as summary. Why does sentence planning matters? It matters because effective planning or effective sentence planning ensures messages are clear, persuasive, and impactful. Next is conversational analysis, adjacency pairs. Predictable conversation patterns such as, how are you? I'm fine. Do you want coffee? Yes, please. Turn-taking strategies. If we say turn-taking, it is strategies for managing who speaks when. Example, pausing at the end of a sentence signals the speaker's turns. Example, how are you? I'm fine. Do you want coffee? Yes, please. So pausing at the end of the sentence signals the next speakers to turn. Why it matters? Smooth turn-taking and adjacency pairs are essential for coherent and polite conversation. Analysis of written text. Hierarchical structures. Written texts often follow organized structures such as the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. Example in academic papers including sections like abstract and result. So that example of hierarchical structure. Next is textual coherence. It is logical sequencing of ideas maintains clarity. Analysis written structure matters. This structure guides readers through complex information and why it matters? This structure guides readers through complex information systematically. So that is my report, the chapter 11 and chapter 12, the grammar and meaning and grammar and discourse. For more questions, you can ask question after this report. Thank you so much and God bless.